Welcome to Stop the Takes, football podcast focused on getting back to just talking ball. I'm Dakota, that's Austin, and today we are kicking off our draft review shows, going division by division, starting with the AFC North today. We'll be working them north, east, south, west, going division by division, starting with both conferences. And we're starting AFC North today. So first on the docket, jumping right into it, is the Cincinnati Bengals. Took Shamar Stewart in the first round. What were your immediate thoughts, Austin, to their draft class?
Just being completely honest, man, it wasn't my favorite class. It wasn't my favorite first round pick. They're chasing high athleticism freaks, man, at positions of need, and that doesn't typically work out, especially edge rushers. Dude, we've talked about this before on the show, but edge rushers, you kind of need to show some production in college if to tend to work out on the NFL level. So that's just kind of my high level overview of this class.
Completely agree. So we'll dive into and kind of touch on a few guys that were drafted. So let's start with Shamar Stewart. The high athleticism freak athlete had like 4.5 sacks in college. Was not very productive. Had some decent pressure numbers, not percentage wise, but was able to produce some pressures, but not at a high rate. Not what you typically see from other first round edge rushers. He went roughly where the consensus had him at. I think he finished like 19th or 21st on the consensus, so he went just before that. But the Bengals take a shot on that athleticism. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, man. It's a risk, but I think Shamar Stewart should go in the first round. I think it's worth the risk in the first round, but high in the first round, I probably wouldn't have went there. Plus, you also have to ask yourself, what did they give up to get him? And there was a lot of edges left on the board, man. A lot of edges. A lot of guys like James Pierce left on the board. That would have probably been a little safer. And I get Mike Green had the off the field, so kind of take him out of that equation a little bit. But there were still guys left I felt like would have been safer picks than Shamar Stewart. And honestly, too, like, yeah, he's an athletic freak, but kind of going back to Pierce, like, he's an athletic freak too. The difference is he had production.
Yeah, yeah.
4.5 sacks in 3 years for Shamar Stewart. That's just not a number you want to see, man. And he played all 3 years in his college career too. So yeah, it's a risk, but listen, if it pays off, it can pay off big. Like if he can develop pass rush moves and he can win at a consistent rate in the NFL, he's got the athleticism to win. He just has to learn to rush the passer.
Yeah, honestly, I feel for Bengals fans a bit too because they've already been down this road, right? A couple years ago, take Miles Murphy in the first round, trying to fix that edge issue. The Trey Hendrick signing ended up being fantastic. Trey Hendrickson has helped fix that, but they've still had gaps on the rest of that defensive line. And now they kind of do what they already did. They go the high upside athlete route with even lower production than Miles Murphy. But he absolutely is a freak athlete. Maybe they just saw TAMU, Texas A&M, freak athlete. We know Miles Garrett's in the division. We'll get one of our own. Except, he was also productive in college. But we'll see if it works out. I mean, he is a very good run defender.
Yes, I was about to say that.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, like, if you like watching him, some people are saying that he would be a good option to kind of help stop Lamar. But something him and James Pierce kind of share is they're actually not that great at containing or finishing tackles on the quarterback, especially when they start moving. So, he can definitely help out in the run game. But it will be interesting to see how he develops as a pass rusher and if they could utilize him in kind of set the edge, don't let Lamar scramble role within the division there.
I agree, man. He does have a decent floor because he is a really good run defender. So at worst, he's gonna be. Listen, I think the comparison is Trayvon Walker because that's what Trayvon Walker was coming out. Very unproductive as a pass rusher in college. Was a decent run defender and extremely athletic. I think the difference though is Trayvon went number one overall and Shamar Stewart went 17th overall. So it's not the worst pick in the world. It's really not. And some team was going to take this chance in the first round, dude.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, it could have been worse. Like there was teams talking about taking him in the top 10 and we would have really not liked that. It's a risky pick, but it could work out and it has a decent floor to it. So listen, it's not my favorite pick in the first round, but solid.
Yeah, completely agree. And overall, this draft wasn't either of our favorites. And I think it's mainly because, unlike their division rivals, the Ravens and Steelers, who kind of let the board fall to them, the Bengals have a tendency to just draft need too much. And because of that, you tend to see yourself in situations where you've overdrafted, per the consensus at least, right? And that's where you go into the draft with needs, forces your hand to do that. So, the Demetrius Knight Jr. pick in the second round, like, not that he's not a very a good player or anything, but consensus had him 83rd. That's a mid second round pick that still has a good amount of value. And because they wanted to fill, depth at linebacker, they kind of forced that pick there. And then they do the same thing with Dylan Fairchild in the third. They wanted to get a guard in there to compete. And so they reach a little bit on him, who was like 118th. They take him at 81. So this tendency to kind of just take positions more so than take what the board gives you. And I think that kind of describes both of those picks.
Yeah, I agree, dude. Reaching on the linebacker in the second round is just a mistake. If you're listen, and we'll get to the Browns later, but the Schlesinger pick, it's like, okay, the difference between him and Knight is that you picked one of the best linebackers in the class. Knight is just he just, again, high athleticism, low production kind of guy. And then Fairchild, listen, I give them a little bit of grace with that pick because we saw that a lot. The interior lineman just got picked consistently over drafted compared to the consensus. I mean, we saw it start right off the bat with Tyler Booker in the first round. So I get it, trying to attack the interior of the offensive line. It was not a very deep interior offensive line class. And Fairchild, I think, will compete to start, dude. He will compete to start. But Knight's interesting. I mean, he's not even listed right now as a starter. So I really don't understand. Like, if you felt like you had to take the linebacker, why not take Jihad Campbell with your 17th overall pick and get a guy who's, listen, consensus number one linebacker, is going to be productive on the next level. So, like you said, dude, it wasn't our favorite draft, but this is all projection, man. And
Right.
when you chase those high athleticism, high upside players, when it hits, it can really work out well. Because sometimes you can get some good value on those guys. Like, if Shamar Stewart could rush the passer, kind of like you compared him to earlier, he'd be Myles Garrett. He'd be like top 5 draft pick if he knew how to rush the passer right now. The thing is, he doesn't. But if he learns, then you got a top 5 value for the 17th overall pick. So it could work out. It's just unlikely to, because usually these kind of players just don't work out at the next level.
Yeah. And it's kind of a theme for the Bengals every year, because I think part of the problem that puts them in this situation is they're one of the teams that just refuses to trade. Like, they just do not trade. They went in with the 6 picks they had and did not move from any of them. Which is rare. Like, a lot of teams, you're trading at some point in the draft, especially as you get later in the draft. Like, people are moving up a few spots in the 4th or 5th. But they went in with 6 picks. They left with those 6 picks. So I think they also kind of put themselves in a rough situation by doing that, because you definitely could have traded down from 49 and still gotten Demetrius Knight, most likely, unless somebody else forces that pick. You don't know for sure, and if they love the guy, they obviously got their guy. But in the rest of their draft, in terms of like reaching wise, wasn't as bad. Barrett Carter is an interesting prospect in general, because him and Jeremiah Trotter were 2 years ago at Clemson, like early mock draft times and stuff had them really high. He just didn't progress linearly like people expect. So not bad value getting him in the 4th round, because I mean he was still a really good college linebacker. So getting him, I think, was a good idea. Don't love doubling up at linebacker.
Exactly.
They're clearly preparing for something, because they still have Pratt and Logan Wilson on the roster. And then can never have too much offensive line help. So the Jalen Rivers pick, like that. And then they could use some running back depth. Taj Brooks was an interesting one. A lot of running backs came off the board, and they clearly didn't value it that high to do it earlier, so they took Taj when they did, which is fine, but nothing exceptional from you know another high upside ish guy. Kind of went with the athleticism. That was essentially their theme. They do like the athletes, but some
And
decent value with those later picks.
yeah, definitely. I mean, Jalen Rivers in the fifth round. I mean, developmental tackle in the fifth round. Definitely like taking that chance. But going back tonight, it really did feel like they just they had in their mind they're drafting a second round linebacker. And once the other good second round linebackers were gone, which there weren't many, this is not a deep linebacker
Right.
class. They just said, okay, just get the next linebacker off our board, and that's what we're gonna do. And again, they didn't do a good job of playing the board. Like they could have traded back 10 picks and still got their guy, picked up extra picks. They didn't. One other thing, probably the last thing I'll say about the Bengals draft is, listen, dude, you only drafted 6 times and you came away with 2 linebackers, a guard, and a running back. I mean, that's just, in my opinion, I would like to draft in more volume, and I would probably attack
Yeah.
more higher value positions, dude. I mean, that's just like, even if a lot of these guys hit, like they become solid starters, they're just not making a big impact on the team. So that's why I look at this class. I'm like, dude, all their eggs are in the Shamar Stewart basket, man. Like if Shamar Stewart busts from this class, then they just, I mean, it was really a pretty unproductive class overall if Stewart doesn't hit.
Yeah, and they really are banking on that. It's like, if one of those late round guys end up becoming something fantastic, then fine. But really, the class will kind of always be defined by what Shamar Stewart was. Because honestly, Miles Murphy's the same way, where you kind of just look at that class that way. And then, one thing to think about too is you leave this draft as looking at the capital you have going to the next. And again, they just have each of their 7 picks because they don't trade. They don't trade draft picks. They just don't. So they're not leaving with any extra draft capital. They don't lose any. But yeah, so last thought with the Bengals class then. So of the 6 guys they picked, which would you consider your favorite? In terms of just either the player, the value, where they got him at. What would be your favorite?
Probably Rivers in the fifth round if I had to pick one. Just because, listen, if you can get a starting tackle in the fifth round, like I'm not saying he's going to become a starting tackle, but if he ever does,
Right.
that's tremendous value. And listen, Stewart as well. I'll just throw out Stewart because, like, if Stewart hits his high end potential and they somehow sign Trey Hendrickson back, then dude, you're looking at an absolutely terrifying defensive line at that point. So that is intriguing. Like that potential is intriguing. So I'll throw those 2 out as probably my favorites.
Definitely agree on the Shamar side. I think I'd throw Barrett Carter for me, mainly just because he's like the only guy in their class that wasn't really a great athlete, but he was just incredibly productive in college. So you kind of know what he is, and if he can plug in and at least be a pretty good run defender, I think the value of him in the 4th round was pretty good. Independent from having already taken a linebacker in the second, just like the value of him there at the 4th. So that is the Cincinnati Bengals 2025 class. So now let's move on to one that I know we like a little bit more.
Yeah.
To the Cleveland Browns. So they make a splash immediately. The top of the draft, trading back from 2 to 5. We'd hit that point where pretty much everybody was mocking Travis Hunter to them, 2nd overall. And it sounds like they 100% would have taken him had they not gotten the trade offer that they did. But the Jags trade up to 2, take Travis. They drop back to 5 and still pick up one of the best players in this class in Mason Graham to pair next to Myles Garrett on that defensive line. So what were your immediate thoughts from that trade and then their class?
Listen, man, we're not doing grades, we're not doing rankings. It's our first year doing this, so we're trying to figure out if we want to do that kind of stuff. But if I had to rank it, I might rank Cleveland's draft as my favorite in the entire NFL, man. It's the first of all, the trade back. You have to start with that because, again, I'll add, yes, you could have had Travis Hunter, and I love Travis Hunter, the player. I think Travis Hunter is going to be great in the NFL, and so I would understand why people don't want to pass that up. But you're getting a first round pick next year, and you're adding a blue chip player. Like they still, and that's a big piece of it, man. Because if they had to trade back into, let's say, the teens to make this happen, and they get one of those like maybe high upside edge rushers, but aren't blue chip guys. There was no blue chip guys left at that point. So, but you still come away with Mason Graham, which is probably 3rd or 4th best player in this class. And you have the Jaguars first round pick next year, which could be a top 10 pick. And then, it continued, dude. I just like the Schlesinger pick. Yes, I get it's a linebacker 2nd round, but a lot of people viewed this linebacker class as a 2 linebacker class, man. And they came away with the 2nd best linebacker. So yeah, right off the bat, their first 2 picks, that's how I felt about it.
Completely agree. I mean, you and I are both massive fans of trading back. I mean, at the end of the day, the draft is a numbers game. There's players you kind of know are going to be good, but for the most part, like you mentioned earlier, it's all projection. You are hoping that these players pan out. So, just statistically speaking, the more at bats you get at that, the more likely it is. And that's not to say that drafting a bunch of guys in the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth round necessarily equals more starters or more stars on your team. But you definitely increase the odds of that happening. So anytime you can trade back, always a big fan of that. And when you pick up an extra first specifically, you only drop back 2 or 3 spots, and you still get one of the blue chip players in this class. And then you pick up the first for next year that most likely will be pretty good. It's hard to say with the Jags for sure. New coach, new GM, who knows what'll happen? But you get an extra first, and you still walk away with Mason Graham. So hard to feel bad about that. And pairing him with Myles Garrett, I'm just excited to see that. That's going to be fun to watch as just a fan of the NFL.
I agree, dude. I mean, listen, Mason Graham and Myles Garrett together. I mean, that's terrifying, dude. It's going to be good right away, too. I can assure you that because you have Myles Garrett. I mean, Myles Garrett's the best edge rusher in the NFL, and if Mason Graham is just solid, it's going to be good. And he's going to be better than solid. He again was one of the very few blue chip players in this class. And then I just think the good process continued, man. A lot of people don't like this draft because the doubling up at quarterback. And listen, I love doubling up at quarterback. You don't have a franchise quarterback. You're still dealing with this Deshaun Watson thing and the contract and the lack of draft capital you had over the last few years because of the trade. I mean, again, listen, it's not a bold take to say this is the worst move in NFL history, and you have to rebuild this team because of it. I mean, they have buried themselves in a pretty deep hole because of that deal. And one way to come out of it, dude, is finding a franchise quarterback. And again, just to your point, dude, more swings at the bat, more darts at the dartboard is better. You're more likely to hit the more you take at it. So, and it was surprising that they took Gabriel before Shedeur, but they got the consensus second best quarterback in this class in the 5th round. And there's a lot of Shedeur debate going on right now. And I get it. He was awful in the interviews. He was. All the reports are saying that. So that's why he fell. It makes a lot of sense why he fell. But you took a 5th round shot at him, Dakota. So it's even if he never works out, he never plays a down for the Browns. How many 5th round picks work out in the NFL? It's very few, man. Very few of those players actually go on to make an impact. And we're talking about a guy who could completely change the franchise. And that's a fact. Whether you hate Shedeur or not, a franchise quarterback, an elite level quarterback, can completely change the trajectory of your team.
Absolutely, yeah. And, we've touched on the Gabriel Shedeur thing a good bit. And at the end of the day, I think it could be, a blessing to have had the situation fall the way that it did. A lot of people have said the same thing, but now that you've drafted him in the 5th round, there may be a little bit more drama that comes with that you have to deal with. But at the same time, it's now easier to walk away from it as well. He's a 5th round pick. They get cut in training camp and in the preseason all the time. So you kind of have the ability to lay down the law immediately to be, no nonsense. Play football here and you can make the team. You could potentially become our quarterback. And now he can go out there and compete with Dylan Gabriel. So I completely agree. I mean, doubling up at quarterback, they're taking the swings. They're trying to figure this out. And I think the process is sound. And they're different quarterbacks too. Gabriel's a bit more. He's sneaky athletic, honestly. That that term that gets thrown around a lot, but he's got more of an arm than Shedeur does. And then with the rest of the class, Schlesinger again, it's different with the Demetrius Knight thing because you didn't, he was the second consensus second. Demetrius was third, but the gap there was substantial. Exactly. Where Schlesinger wasn't as much of a reach at the time that they took him. And then doubling up at running back is probably, I do love both of the running backs, but it's probably something I wouldn't. It's tough because I do love the players in that class, but it's one of those where, people have talked about this a lot. If you just reordered when they were taken, I think you'd feel way better about it too. It'd be one of those things that would have broke the mock draft sims where it's just an A+.
Exactly.
But the order is just fascinating.
Because you were never in those mock draft sims, you were never getting Shadur in the 5th round. You just weren't. That
No.
wasn't going to happen. And I wonder with the running backs, because I agree with you, dude. Taking 2 running backs in a class doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now for this team, it might, because they don't have a lot of running back depth at all. Like they needed a starter, and they also need depth.
Yeah.
But I wonder if they just love Dylan Sampson. Like they took Junkins and they just like, listen, like we didn't expect Sampson to be left in this at the 4th round at this point. Let's just take him because it's just good value. We think he's a good football player. That's very likely as well. And then we got to touch on Harold Fanning as well, dude. I mean,
Yeah.
Harold Fanning is probably, dude, I mean, outside of the 2 top tight ends, this is by far, in my opinion, the highest upside tight end in the entire class. And that's kind of the difference between, like, I like high upside guys if it's like 1 per class. Like they took Harold Fanning in this class, and yes, Harold Fanning, he has question marks. He played at a small school. He had production at the small school. He just played at a small school. He just, but dude, like if that hits in the 3rd round, getting a starting tight end potentially in the future in the 3rd round, I just absolutely love it, man. I just love everything about this class. I thought it was great process. And listen, if you want to nitpick, it's like the positional value in the 2nd round. Like they left some good stuff on the table in the 2nd round. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Taking Schlesinger and Junkins, like you have to mention that. They could have got some of those elite prospect corners we were talking about, or some of the edge rushers available. But overall, man, just looking at this draft, I'm just like, I just love it from a process standpoint. And you have to add in, this is like when we talk about drafts next season, right, Dakota? We have to talk about, well, part of this season's draft is next year's 1st rounder for the Jags. Like that has to be built into that equation. So overall, man, if it's not my favorite draft, it's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah. It is tough to play the what if card with it. Because if you do walk away this 33rd, 36th, they still have a bit of a need at receiver. It's kind of surprising
True.
they didn't draft any. And Luther Burden was there.
Yeah.
Just switching things up, how you feel. What if they had taken Burden at 33 and like Ezraku at 36 or something and build out the D line, or grab like Benjamin Morrison or one of the other top corners that were still on the board then, like a Trey Amos. But overall, and I completely agree on Harold Fannin. It's funny because he's like one of the, like almost opposites from the high upside in terms of where it comes from athleticism, where his comes from he was insanely productive, but at Bowling Green. And his athleticism is okay. But the guy can play football. And he had like a single season, he like broke tight end records in college football last season from a receiving perspective. So definitely has the opportunity to plug in and immediately play alongside of David Njoku. And compete for opportunities. Because, I sent it to you earlier today, but man, that 2017 class, they're not very young anymore. So David Njoku is also getting up there in age.
That's what I'm saying. You have to replace guys like that at some point. And tight ends tend to fall off a cliff pretty quick, dude. So, and I just part of it is I like these players, but again, I just think it was good process, dude. The doubling up at quarterback, the trade back, and they still got a blue chip guy. Like at the very worst in this class, dude, you just came away with a starting running back and a blue chip player in Mason Graham and the Jags 1st rounder next year, and potentially your franchise quarterback.
Completely agree. So to end in the Browns, I think we both know the answer to this favorite pick. I mean, you can't beat the value of Shadur in the 5th round. You just can't.
You can't, dude. I totally agree. And he's a polarizing player right now, especially amongst the fan base, the NFL fan base. But in the 5th round, that's a no-brainer, dude. I thought it was a no-brainer in the 3rd round. Like him getting past the 2nd round to me was just nuts. He's probably a 2nd round level player, but since it's the QB position, like I would totally understand overdrafting him in the 1st. But he went to the 5th, man. Like again, there's no risk in it. There's no risk in it at all. Like you said, you can cut him in the offseason before he even plays a snap for the Browns, and it doesn't matter.
Yep. Completely agree. So that is the Cleveland Browns 2025 class. So let's move on to the the Baltimore Ravens.
Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah. Forgot how to alphabetize. Another just solid overall class. And again, very different from what we had just talked about with the Bengals, where, a team that's just really good at letting the board fall to them. with their first pick and Malachi, like probably one of the top 15 players in the class, but he's not at a valuable position, so it's a little bit tougher to justify it in the top 15. But when you're sitting there pretty at 27, you can just draft good football players. And then one of the bigger storylines of the draft was Mike Green's fall, not due to his playing ability, but due to the off-field stuff. But the Ravens take a shot at him there at 59 in the second round. What were your thoughts on the Ravens?
Listen, man, this, like you said, they let the board fall to him, man. They didn't overthink it. And what good teams do, Dakota, which is my favorite draft strategy is they don't draft for need. They did not draft for need this entire draft, in my opinion. I don't think they came into the draft thinking, oh, we just need a safety. Like a safety is just like what this team desperately needs. That's what we are. Like that's the player we are away from winning a Super Bowl. No, what they did was when they got the 27th pick, they said, oh, Malachi Starks is the best player left on the board. So let's not overthink it. Let's take the best player left on the board. And Mike Green is a risk. I get it. Mike Green is an extreme risk. He has the off-field issues. But, dude, this is a guy who was extremely productive. I thought he was the second best edge rusher in the class behind Abdul Carter. So 17 sacks in 2024, that's unbelievable numbers. And, yes, it's at Marshall. But he had games against Ohio State that he was still productive in. So I love taking a chance on a guy, like taking a chance on Mike Green, who, by the way, is decently athletic and has the production in the second round. That's like, I just love taking that over. I'm not to crap on the Bengals again, but the Shamar Stewart in the 17th pick, man. I just think pick like this was more likely to work out, in my opinion. And again, it was them not overthinking it. Like they probably evaluated the off the field stuff and they were fine with it enough to take him in the second round and said, hey, he's the best player left on the board, so let's just take him.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, Malachi Stark's going to be immediately, being able to plug him in and start playing him alongside Kyle Hamilton really early. And then with Mike Green, off the field stuff aside, just easily one of the best pass rushers in this class. And to your point, probably second behind Abdul Carter. Really just your taste of the crop of those options. But they do their evaluations. Every team did. And they felt taking him there was the right fit. And so, I mean, all things considered, the Ravens are a pretty solid organization too. So, hopefully whatever may have been going on and, I know the details of it or whatnot, but hopefully that can help clean up, his future for him a bit there and be, an integral piece to that Ravens defensive pass rush. Also looking at their other picks, Emory Jones, everybody's talking about Will Campbell, but grabbing the other tackle at LSU was a decent pick there in the third round, adding some depth to that offensive line. And then, they added a couple other, another tackle later on, Carson Vincent at Alabama A&M. So adding some pieces to the offensive line. They did take a kicker. So apparently Justin Tucker's, he has been struggling, man. He has. Never a fan of drafting kickers because every single offseason in the NFL, there is a starting kicker you can just go get. Exactly. And I don't know, unless you're getting Justin Tucker and the odds of that are pretty low. Not a fan of drafting them. But two other picks of theirs I really love, though. LeJontay Wester in the sixth there was a solid pick out of Colorado. Getting him, played with Shador. Was pretty productive for them over the past couple seasons. Transferred from Florida Atlantic, I think, and was pretty solid there for a few years. So I like them taking a shot on him. And then Aeneas Peebles. I think it was incredible value getting him where they did. Solid guy that was played his entire career in the ACC. I think he was at Duke first, but out of Virginia Tech. So I think just taking some solid production with the athleticism guys as they come up on the board. And again, when you're in, one of the differences between talking about a team like the Ravens and Browns is where you are as a franchise too. Sometimes even with the Bengals, sometimes, you're not performing the way you're supposed to with the quarterback you have and whatnot. So you feel like you need to take these chances to try to, go from 0 to 100 immediately by taking high upside. Ravens are just in a completely different situation where even if you do that, there's less risk involved. But two, you also draft in volume, which is another thing they're great at with 11 picks in this class.
No doubt, dude. Drafting in volume always helps. It's just interesting. So first of all, Peoples in the sixth round is great value, dude. 17.8% pass rush win rate in 2024. Dude, he could literally be a rotational pass rusher for them and actually make an impact as a sixth round pick. But the thing I found interesting, you draft the kicker, and apparently the kicker to you is more valuable than Peebles and Wester. Like, you draft a
Yeah,
kicker before those guys. Like, really? Like, those are dudes who could actually make impacts at receiver and interior pass rusher, which is infinitely more valuable than kicker, dude. Like, college kickers suck. Like, I don't. When's the last good college kicker to come out? I don't like. I can't even think of any.
We use a Colts fan, no, drafting him pretty high does not work out either.
It does not, dude. It just does not work out. So that's interesting to me. But when you have 11 draft picks, why not just throw one at a kicker? I don't know. But yeah, Peebles could absolutely. I mean, I thought Peebles was I thought he could be maybe round 3, round 4 kind of player. So getting him in the sixth was really good value in my opinion. And again, like, I think a theme overall, and we touched on this in a couple of our draft videos, but for people that didn't see those videos, one of the things we said the theme was that you can tell the good players or the good teams in the NFL, man. Like, the good teams in the NFL do not overthink the draft process. They take best player available, and that's how they have the rosters they have, and that's why they're good. So, I mean, I think the Ravens are a great example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's been a consistent thing. The only thing they've even like whiffed on occasionally is when they take those edge rushers in the first round, like a Dafe away, who's developed. He was very raw when they drafted him, but they just have a tendency to draft in volume, and in doing that, tend to just take good football players. It helps when you're picking at the back half because there's less overthinking involved, and you can let the board fall to you a bit more. But they've become very good at that. And then, rounding out the rest of their class with Longer Beam from Rutgers was a, honorable mention, all Big Ten, ran a 4.39, pretty fast corner, pretty athletic, a guy that could potentially add some depth to their secondary. And then again, adding more depth on the offensive line with Garrett Dellinger and guard at LSU. And then we didn't touch on these with the others, but they also were incredibly active with UDFAs.
Dude, they sound like a whole roster of UDFAs.
Yeah, and then between that and also the camp invitees, the most notable, we didn't touch on these a ton with the others because a lot of the names, a lot of them aren't known. There's a few guys we'll probably point out as we do these that are a bit more, kind of surprising that they went undrafted more so. But the more interesting one they had is Jared Penning. Out of Northern Iowa, which is Trevor Penning's brother. So be curious to see how if he can develop. His brother's still currently starting for the Saints. I think they drafted Banks to replace that, but his brother gets signed.
Yeah, we got bad news for you, buddy. You might be losing your job soon. But
because they already had Fuaka last year, so
I actually think it was a pretty good UDFA class, though, man. There's a few guys, like we forgot to mention Seth McLaughlin, Ohio State center for the Bengals. They actually got pretty good value on him. So shout out to the Bengals, one of my favorite picks, and it wasn't even a pick for them. But listen, dude, I think there's some solid UDFA players this year that could make rosters, dude. I mean, if you make a roster as an undrafted free agent, that's a big story. But if you can play at some point, that's even a bigger story. So yeah, we'll definitely touch on those as we go. But yeah, I mean, the Ravens, dude, you expect a team that's like kind of low on depth to take 50 chances at undrafted free agents, but the Ravens, like, dude, they brought in like 20 or 30 guys, dude. It's absolutely unreal how many they're bringing in. So,
and again, the drafting in volume thing. Next year, they've already got 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 picks, 4 fifth rounders. So, being active in these trades, helping you develop 4 fifths, man. They're already developing for that next year. Those are weapons for their first 4 picks to trade up with. So they're leaving with some capital as well. I'm assuming again with this one, we probably have the same favorite pick. I mean, the value wise, take everything out beside just the football player value of getting Mike Green at 59.
I agree. I will throw out Peebles though. Peebles is currently listed as their backup 3 tech. So if he can end up being a starter, I mean, that's a guy that's definitely going to make the roster just looking at this depth chart. And I mean, that could be a huge value pick in the 6th round. So
perfect. So that is Baltimore Ravens 2025 class. Now let's wrap things up with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I'm sure all the fans from each of these teams have been listening to every class because they are so friendly to one another.
Yeah.
More so, you just want to see what you can trash on the other teams.
Oh, yeah.
AFC North is definitely one of the most fierce fan bases across the NFL, with especially with the Steelers and Ravens rivalry. So love it. This another class. I think we, mainly just even 3 picks are enough to say that I love this class.
Yeah.
But main pick, they take Derek Harmon. All the noise at 21, all the noise they were going to take a QB in this class, and they do very late. But all that aside, they take Derek Harmon, the interior pass rusher out of Oregon at 21, which I thought was a fantastic pick. Keep adding to that defensive line, and the age with Cameron Hayward, and you got TJ Watt, who's also getting a little bit older there on the edge, 2017 class guys, along with Alex Highsmith. So love that pick for them in the first round.
I agree, dude. I love the Derek Harmon pick as well. This is a team that has a quarterback question, and they didn't force a quarterback, and which is interesting. Like, I like taking shots on quarterbacks, and maybe they know something I don't, so that's one thing I'd be a little bit worried about. But Derek Harmon is going to be a starter for them, and just adds to the terrifying defensive line that the Steelers have pretty much year in, year out. And this will help bolster that defensive line. So, and they didn't stop there. Jack Sawyer in round 4. Loved the Jack Sawyer pick, man. Honestly, that's an early contender for my favorite pick for them, just because, listen, Jack Sawyer is kind of the opposite of a lot of the Bengals players. Low athleticism score, but very high production. I mean, this dude is a straight up baller. And I compared him to TJ Watt in a way, because TJ Watt, listen, he was more athletic coming out. I mean, he was a first round pick, so he has more athleticism. But dude, he is just finds a way to make a play at the end of games. Either a sack, strip fumble, interceptions TJ Watt has made in the NFL. He's just so productive in that way. And that's Jack Sawyer for me, man. Like, Jack Sawyer in the playoffs just made so many clutch plays in big time moments. It feels like some dudes just know how to get a sack when a sack is needed. And that's kind of how I feel about Jack Sawyer. And listen, in the 4th round, I mean, that's a no-brainer, man. I felt like he could have been a second round pick. So that's definitely one of my 4 more favorite picks for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Doing the mock draft sims, like, there was a lot of times where he's there and you're like, well, this team needs an edge rusher at the end of the first, so you send him to the Ravens or the Eagles or something. But it's hard to see him crazy to see him on the board in the 4th round. The value there is wild. And again, your point, like, just a game wrecker, like in the playoffs for Ohio State, when they needed to play, it just seemed like they could turn him at any moment. Like, he knew he could get one, and he went out there and did it, like on the play against Texas. And then I personally liked the Caleb Johnson pick. We knew they were probably going to take a running back. Them not having a second round pick, I think, played a lot in the way they evaluated their decisions with the QB situation. I think, based on the way they drafted, it's hard to assume they're not signing Aaron Rodgers. I think that they drafted, to me, as if they are.
I agree.
By taking Will Howard in the 6th. Exactly. They think somebody else is going to be their quarterback, because Will Howard in the 6th, you can't make him be the starter.
Of course,
let's be honest, you can't trot Mason Rudolph out there either. But the value of Will Howard to pinch be your backup in the 6th is solid. But loved the Caleb Johnson pick in the 3rd. They needed a starting running back. They lost Najee Harris. Jalen Warren is okay, but they needed a starter, and Caleb Johnson just feels like a Steeler.
He did.
Love that pick. I feel like he has that mentality, the bruising mentality to play for the steel curtain. So yeah, love that pick in the 3rd. And then Yahya Black, D lineman out of Iowa, take another Iowa guy to add even more to that interior defensive line. They clearly had a vision, but was decent value there. So a lot of defensive picks. They took the running back and quarterback and then loaded up on the interior, then added the edge, a lot of D linemen, and then the linebacker Carson Brenner out of Washington, and then Dante Kent, corner out of Central Michigan, wrapped it out for them.
Steelers love their defense, man. That definitely was a theme for them. Going back to Caleb Johnson, 4.42 yards after contact per attempt. in 2024, that is unbelievable. That definitely feels like a Steelers back to me. And they also, yes, it's a running back, but you feel the starting position in the third round. Like, I can't overemphasize how valuable that will be, because like you don't usually get starters in the third round. Like, that's usually when it starts to be depth pieces and rotational guys. So that's huge. And I agree, the Will Howard pick, again, you're taking a chance on a quarterback. I agree with you. Like, as of now, it just feels like they know they're getting someone, whether it's going to be Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins in a trade or Will Levis in a trade. Don't love all of those options, but they clearly have a plan. Like, it's the Steelers. They have a plan. This is a winning franchise. But you do have to take a chance on a guy, because whether you sign any of those three guys that I just mentioned, none of those guys are the future long term. Like, those are not the future long term. So you take a chance on a guy. So yeah, I mean, overall, I do like this class quite a bit. Especially the defensive guys. I think I really like, because I mean, that could really, like, they already have a good defensive line, but some of those guys are getting a little bit older, and so you have to kind of start future proofing for that, and they did that in this draft.
Absolutely, yeah. And they did something I'm a big fan of. I always like thinking about like wide receivers in terms of having kind of like what the Packers did, where you get Matthew Golden, the speedy, slightly smaller guy, and pair him with a Savion Williams. But they did that on the defensive line, where you get Derek Harmon, who's the pass rusher, the guy who can wreak havoc in the backfield on passing downs, and then you add Black to be the nose tackle. You get two very different skill set guys. Dude's 336 pounds. He just fills the middle. He's a run defender, So you get those both skill sets to then add to your depth. So he'll probably be able to play relatively early on, even being a later round pick, just because you need rotational guys like that out there. So yeah, and then I completely agree on the Will Howard front. He played his best football when it mattered most. And it's interesting how sometimes things like that can overrate people, but it seems like it didn't change his value a ton going in the sixth, which is interesting. Where sometimes people like, it's funny how like a guy who only starts for a season and plays really well, like how it can inflate their draft stock so heavily with the tools and whatnot. And Will Howard isn't necessarily like the prototypical size and whatnot for an NFL quarterback, but he's also tough. The dude is tough. He
Like
likes
you
to
said.
run.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. Yeah, he likes to run. He's a bit mobile, which in today's world, like the base level of his athleticism at quarterback is just drastically different than what it was 15 to 20 years ago. But yeah, I think watching that tape from him in the playoff would be something that I would, when you're sitting down and talking to him, you'd be like, what do we have to do to get this out of you day in and day out?
Exactly. And one way you do that is trading for DK Metcalf with your second round pick. We have to mention that in this draft. Listen, you have to give up a lot of money for DK Metcalf, so it's not just a second round pick. You also have to pay the contract, which is a big part of it. However, I mean, that is part of the draft class, man. They said they felt like, is my guess, considering they didn't take a single wide receiver in this class, they probably felt like this is a pretty weak wide receiver class. So what do we need to do? We need to go trade for a wide receiver. And I think George Pickens' future is also up in the air. I think he'll likely be there next season. I don't know about the season after that, though. So they went out and guaranteed a good wide receiver, because that's what DK Metcalf is. He's a great wide receiver, definitely a wide receiver number one in the NFL. So that's definitely part of the class as well. So just overall, I think this is, once again, good process by the Steelers. And out of these drafts in the AFC North, man, I pretty much liked them all except for the Bengals, unfortunately. But three of my favorite drafts in the entire draft class, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And again, looking at the future of what they left too, because they used the second round pick on DK, which is definitely part of the equation. And I would say, from their perspective, they're probably feeling pretty good about the value of that versus the receivers in the second round. Luther Burden went there, but the upside, and they wouldn't have had a chance at him anyway where he went. So, but they leave this draft with, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 picks in next year's draft.
Wow.
A first, a second. They have 2 thirds, 2 fourths, 2 fifths. So they go into next year with a good amount of draft capital. So I definitely think, George Pickens, having not drafted a wide receiver, seems pretty unlikely they'll trade him, before this next season starts. But they have the capital next season to kind of load up at receiver if they want to do a little, soft reset there and build around DK and whoever's playing quarterback. We don't even know who's playing quarterback this year, but
Exactly.
whoever's playing quarterback next year.
That's a big question mark for the Steelers, man. And we'll kind of get into that more in the offseason as it goes. Right now, we're just focusing on the draft class. But, I mean, even if you sign Aaron Rodgers, there's still big question marks about quarterback. I think we have to mention this chart I sent you earlier on Twitter, Dakota, this kind of GPA chart for each draft class, which is essentially just an accumulation of
Mhm.
big time draft analyst grades for each team. And it basically gave an average and ranked them, which is kind of fascinating. It kind of also speaks to how we feel about these draft classes. The Ravens finished the highest out of the AFC North at 8 overall in the NFL. The Browns were number 9, very very highly impacted by Mel Kiper's A plus, but I also really like that class, so I kind of agree with Mel there. And then the Steelers were 16 in that ranking, and the Bengals were 32. So they had the dead last
Sorry, Bengals
class.
fans.
Sorry, Bengals fans. I don't think it's that bad because, like, again, kind of going back to what we've talked about a lot after the draft, which is, dude, these teams are just getting better at doing this. There's not just
Yeah,
absolutely awful draft classes this year. And listen, you're going to be able to dunk on a lot of people, Bengals fans, if Shamar Stewart ends up being a superstar, which is in his range of outcomes.
absolutely. Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know if they're last for me. If I'm not going to do any official, full scale rankings, but I know of one team that I, at least on the surface, think would put below them. We won't call them out yet. We'll get to it. But to wrap up the Steelers in a bow, I think it's another one though. Jack Sawyer, probably the favorite pick, right? It is for
Yes.
me at least. The value there. I mean, I love that. He also, it's crazy how this. I mean, this is part of why they're good and why their team is consistently a certain way, but just feels like a Steeler. You know what I mean? Like
It
him and Caleb
does.
Johnson both just felt like Steelers. So them having an ability to just go find those guys and add them to their roster yet again. Um,
If I had to pick a different pick, um, I I think I'd go with the first rounder, man, Derek
yeah,
Harmon. I mean, because listen, if it's not a great quarterback class. I like taking chances on quarterback, but with all the Shadur drama and stuff, there's a big difference taking him at 21 in the 5th round. Like, if they take him at 21, I don't know if I like that as much as taking him in the 5th round, as we kind of discussed with the Browns. So, but overall, I mean, it was definitely a solid class for the Steelers.
perfect. Well, that wraps up the AFC North, our first division down. Hopefully, they didn't upset Bengals fans too much. Shamar Stewart will get there. We believe. We
We do.
believe.
We do.
Um,
It could happen.
but it could. Yeah. I mean, again, at the end of the day, all of this is projection. That's the
Yeah,
thing. Like, we feel
exactly.
confident. You feel better about certain players, but at the end of the day, we don't know what they will be. And there's a lot of analysts and the talking heads like to pretend, just for you know, the interaction that they know. Mel Kiper raging on about he knows Shador is going to be the next Tom Brady because he was so right about Jimmy Clausen and Johnny Manziel and Brady Quinn and the
Exactly,
long
man.
list of quarterbacks he completely whiffed on. So
Listen,
yeah,
no one's good at QB evaluations, Mel. And that's kind of why I guess I mean, I have to say this before we get off here, dude, because we kind of had this discussion off air and I think it's an interesting discussion. It's why I hate this discourse that's happening, because you either have to hate Mel Kiper and hate Shadur Sanders, or you have to love Shadur Sanders and spend 4 hours on the ESPN broadcast, making some. Listen, that was a questionable career decision for Mel, man. He's getting older. That was a questionable career decision to talk about Shadur Sanders while Cam Ward is up there trying to have his moment, getting drafted and all that. It was a disaster. That's why we're seeing everyone dunk on it, because it was a disaster. But that doesn't mean the Shadur Sanders pick was a bad pick. Shadur Sanders in the 5th round is fantastic value. Mel is correct about that. He's just a little bit higher on Shadur Sanders than a lot of people, and kind of made that like the whole headline of the draft, which was a problem. But that can be a problem alongside the great value that the Browns got in the 5th round by drafting the consensus second best QB in the class. That's what the consensus says, man. Like people can say, "Oh, he's trash," and that's why he fell to the 5th round. But that's not honest, because the honest assessment is he was in the consensus 20th overall player in the class. Like this is a guy that a lot of people are high on, not just Mel Kiper.
100%. And at the end of the day, that's the type of takes we're trying to stop, right?
Exactly.
And it's because there's so much more nuance to everything, right? Like people just want absolutism one way or the other. It's what drives interactions, but nothing is ever that simple and ever that black and white. And yeah, the decision to just go on a tirade on ESPN while other guys are having the moment of their life happen. Cam Ward, who started as a 0-star recruit and has one of the coolest stories for a first overall pick ever, don't even get to see him cry while he gets his phone call on ESPN because they were showing Shedeur highlights. And again, you then leeway that into just hating Shedeur when it's also not his fault that was happening. But first mistake was watching on ESPN anyway. You should watch on the NFL Network. We'll plug them. Love Rich and the guys.
That's a fact. Seriously, though, that broadcast is fantastic. NFL Network should be where you watch the draft at. They actually talk about the prospects being picked.
Every single time. And at the end of the day, yeah, what Mel did was ridiculous. And I'm glad that, Reese Davis stood up to him, and Louis Riddick got tired of it too, and they just kind of said, all right, enough is enough. Because at the end of the day, those takes and those things, you're no longer being objective, and it's just all emotionally driven on what you think is best. And that's the least of anybody's concern. That's not what any of that is about. It's not what the draft's about. It's not what any of this discourse is about. It's about the athletes, those guys getting drafted, their stories, and made it all about himself, and then also turned people against him because of that. So hate to see that for Shedeur, because again, 5th round pick, incredible value. Like that's just an objective way to look at it. Regardless of anything, he was a first round grade from a consensus pick perspective. Getting in the 5th round, fantastic. So
totally agree, man.
Well, now that we've got on our soapbox to stop those takes, we'll officially wrap up the AFC North. We will roll out the rest of the divisions, starting with NFC North next. So if you're a fan of one of those other divisions, hang tight. We are going to try to get these out over the next 2 weeks, maybe 3, just depends. But we will start hammering these out for you guys. So just keep a lookout for your team's division. But until next time, please like, subscribe, share, do all that stuff. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for talking ball with us.